Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the new moon solar eclipse in the second decan of Taurus. I am joined here today by my good friend Hannah Kuhary. How are you doing today, Hannah?
I'm doing good. It feels very springy over here.
Yeah, I love Taurus season, so it's one of my favorite times of the year, and I'm excited about some of the changes that might be coming up here for us. Um, So if all of you out there are feeling good, let us know where you're coming from here in the chat. I see Remco is stopping in from the Netherlands. I think we're as far as the feeling good part. There's always some a mixed bag around eclipses, right, Hannah? Like,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we might be feeling drained a little bit before we get renewed on Saturday here or Sunday, depending on where you're at in the world or whatnot. But yeah, if you're just joining us, let us know where you're coming from. Tarja is stopping in from Finland. Manu is here from Sweden. How you doing? Place of Stillness. Always enjoy seeing people stopping in the chat. If you're just joining us here, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you want to make a material donation while we're talking today, there's a little $sign called a super chat or a super sticker, and that really helps us out. So, Hannah, you are an astrologer that is located now. I know you've been moving around a little bit. Where are you at? And tell us more about your services.
Sure. Yeah. I'm currently located in the Kansas City area, although I'll be relocating to Omaha, Nebraska sometime in July, maybe August. We'll see. We're building a house, so a lot of it is just when the house can be done. But Midwest, born and raised, and yeah, I'm an astrologer, and I'm also a psychic medium, and I feel like I have kind of a unique approach to working with astrology, as well as more on the esoteric and kind of spiritual side. But I'm a Gemini North Node, so all the learning for me, I definitely am an eternal student, and love getting the opportunity to chat with you. So thanks for having me back.
Yeah, you're my eclipse go-to. I think you're like my. I think whenever I've gone into crisis mode, I'm like, oh God, man, Hannah, I gotta talk to Hannah, like, because I think you were my guest for the last new moon solar eclipse, right?
Yeah,
Or was it the full moon? I can't remember. I think it was the
it,
new moon.
it was the new moon. Well, was
Yeah,
it? Yeah, it was the Sagittarius
yeah,
eclipse.
about 6 months ago or so, and always enjoy our chats. So I'm seeing Raven. Thank you for joining us from the Midwest. Hannah and I were talking earlier about our respective football loyalties. If you're watching in video today, you can see I've got my Green Bay Packers shirt on today because today is what I affectionately dub football Christmas, aka the NFL draft. And if you have a really analytical mind like me, you really enjoy all the possibilities of like new players and analyzing statistics. And Hannah is a Vikings fan, so we'll forgive her today. No, it's great. As I was telling Hannah before we got on here, if you're from the Midwest and you grew up in like a sports family, there you just can't help it. The loyalty that comes through that is important, and there's like this mutual respect, even if you're a fan of a rival team, and it's all in good fun. For me, it
Absolutely.
is.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you, Amber, for the super sticker. I really appreciate that. I love the little jumping jacks person we have going on there in the chat box. Uh, Raven is coming here from KC. She's asking KC, Missouri or KC, Kansas?
Oh, I'm Missouri.
Missouri. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Lynn is joining us from Vermont. Welcome, Lynn. All right, Hannah, anything you've got coming up in your hopper as far as astrological offerings before we get started here?
So nothing new astrologically speaking, but I do read the Akashic records, and that's something that has been a real pillar to my business, and something that my clients really seem to love. And I actually took a step back from doing a lot of that to focus more on my studies and a lot of my one-on-one clients. But with this eclipse energy, I've really felt the nudge from my guides to reopen up those sessions. So I do have spots that I've filled for May, but I will be opening my books for June in a couple of weeks. So if you're interested in exploring the Akashic Records with me, be sure and get on my email list. I know you'll probably link that stuff at the end, but that's the best way to kind of keep in touch with what's going on with me and timing for all of that.
Very cool. And your website again is Divine Sky Mystic. Is that right?
Yes.
.com. Okay, divinesskymystic.com. If you want to explore the Akashic Records with Hannah, that is a good place to start. That sounds very cool. That sounds like a very cool offering. I'd be interested in checking some of that out. That'd be neat.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got Alfay Weatherly is joining us from Arizona. Hello there. And Henry Harrison. Welcome, Henry. Good to see you back here. Manu says, haha, when you say the Vikings fan, I think of Ragnar and Rollo sailing west. I guess it's a geographical bias. Yeah. Manu is joining us from Scandinavia. So Vikings has a different connotation where they are. So,
well, I'm 50% Norwegian and I still have family in Norway. And actually the mascot from my high school was a Ragnar. So
very cool. Yeah, I actually have Norwegian ancestry too. The Thorsons were my family line from Norway. So yeah, like I said, born into a Green Bay Packers family with grandparents in Wisconsin. So I'm sorry, I just can't help it. It's just
I forgive you. It's totally fine.
Yep. So all right, Nat is joining us here as well. Happy to see all of you in the chat. So a couple other business things before we get rolling. I do have a Decans webinar coming up on May the 14th. So I'm going to be doing my Decans of Taurus webinar where we're going to be exploring the mythology of Taurus, the tarot cards associated with the 310 degree slices of that sign. We're going to talk about how to integrate that into your astrological practice. We have a nice discussion throughout and at the end as well. So check that out. There's a link to sign up for that in the description of this video or on my website, spencermichaud.com. And you can save 20% using the coupon code Taurus20 up until the 1st of May. So if you're looking to save a few bucks, that will be, you've got a few more days left to sign up. So, and I appreciate all of you who have been reaching out with interest in that. So that's what I've got going on. You can also reach out if you're looking to schedule a reading or a transit reading, a natal reading, anything like that at my website, spencermichaud.com as well. I did want to give all of you a little update with the, I've got like a kind of a book club thing gestating in my brain. I'm trying to find the right platform for that, but that is in the works. So please keep your eyes peeled for that. And again, if you want to be the first to figure out when that's happening, I also have an email list. So if you want to know when book club is going on, sign up on the email list, which you can also find at spencermichaud.com. All right, friends, that's all the business that we've got out of the way, right?
Yeah.
We kind of have to do that as astrologers who are mostly self-employed here. We got to hawk our wares and then we dive into the meat of the potatoes here. All right. Let's see. Stars in Harmony Oracle is joining us from Oklahoma. So another, I guess, is that the Dust Bowl we could call it? What is Oklahoma? Like, what is the affectionate term for the Midwest, the Great Plains, right?
Great Plains. Yeah. Oklahoma is a state I have lived in too. So
yeah, very cool. Yeah. Oklahoma, Nebraska, lots of corn and wheat down there for
Dakota, sure. Minnesota, Iowa. Yeah, I've just made my rounds.
Oh, I can hear your Minnesota now. It's not Minnesota, it's Minnesota. Minnesota. I love it. I was born in Chicago, so I have some hard A's that come out every once in a while. Chicago.
Yeah, I hear it for sure.
Yeah. All right. So pleasantries aside here. So we are looking at a new moon solar eclipse on the 30th of April, 2022 at 4:28 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of go over is, Hannah, do you have any big picture thoughts on not only the eclipse, but maybe some of the energies that we're experiencing right now in the sky and what we've been dealing with as a collective?
Yeah, there's a lot going on right now. And I will just say, even though I am a Pisces moon, this Pisces energy, my dreams the last couple of weeks have been bananas,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
bananas, so vivid, so bizarre, just kind of like out of the ordinary for like things that I normally dream about. I had a dream the other night that involved a flamethrower. Like I don't dream about this kind of stuff. I was like, what is being processed in my subconscious right now that needs to have a flamethrower?
Have you ever actually seen a flamethrower in person or been around one?
Yeah, no, I can't say I've been around one, but I've seen one.
Because I have. It's crazy. I just one small digression, if you'll forgive me.
Absolutely.
I went up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan on a vacation a few years ago, which is a really cool place.
Mhm.
And we stayed in this little hotel. I think it was called the Clark Motel. And in the back of it, they had this like airplane hangar full of like weird collectible things.
Uh-huh.
And the guy, it's usually like where these bikers stop off to stay. And they invited us back to hang out in this airplane hangar that had like collection of like trucker hats, weird like snowmobiles, all sorts of weird stuff, a weather tower that they would drop bowling balls off of. And he's like, "You guys want to see something cool?" We're like, "Yeah, I guess." There's a flamethrower. It's like, "Check this out." It just shoots like a 30-foot flame. So that was the first thing I was thinking about when you were talking about your flamethrower dreams. So
Yeah, it's just so random.
yeah,
So there's that going on.
sure.
Um, I think this Mercury and Pluto conversation that's happening today is also really important as we're moving into the eclipse. I feel like it's really reminding us right now to take notice of messages that are coming in for you today. Maybe as you're listening to this, what are the points that are really feeling like they're hitting home for you or themes that are coming up? So, both of these planets are headed into retrograde. I think Pluto is just a couple
Yeah.
hours away from turning retrograde. And then we're going to see Mercury in a few days as we enter into May also turn retrograde in Gemini, where we're really going to be flooded with a lot of, busy ideas that we're processing. And so I feel like having this eclipse somewhere in the middle is a time to really open up, especially with this, Uranian signature, really opening up to something new, being welcome or welcoming in potential magic,
Yeah.
things that could kind of shake up our normal routines and experiences. And then we're going to move into a period where we're really processing, okay, what did that mean for me? How could this be relevant in my life? And especially once Mercury then moves back into Taurus, figuring out how are we going to make these new ideas practical and tangible in our lives. So I feel like this could be a really constructive period for us. And my other big picture thought about this eclipse is that this is a powerful eclipse. And, there's already been a lot of chatter about how this one is quite benign in regards to ecliptic energy.
Right.
But I also see this eclipse as energy that's not just spanning the typical 6-month cycle, but it's going to be re-triggered multiple times because we've got Mars that's going to be coming through Taurus in July. The North Node is going to be retrograding back to that 10-degree point in December and January, so coming into 2023. And then we're going to have Jupiter moving through in Taurus in 2023 and 2024. So I feel like this is big energy that could really be life-changing for us in terms of what we're manifesting in the future and how we're building stability for our lives, kind of in the big picture perspective here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely fundamental and foundational. I like those words.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have been hearing a lot of chatter about this eclipse maybe being one that's um, not as harsh as some other eclipses.
Mhm.
Generally eclipses weren't really thought of fun events
Mhm.
traditionally, right? Because one of the lights, the life givers, were shutting off or being swallowed up by a demon or a dragon or something of that nature, and that was kind of scary for people in antiquity. But yeah, I agree 100%. Like these are epic times right now. I think especially with the Venus Jupiter conjunction happening simultaneously, we can kind of break that down in a second, but yeah, a few big picture confirmations, just echoing what you were saying is, um, this eclipse being very tightly conjoined Uranus is really asking us to shake up the way that we deal with our resources, the way that we deal with our rhythms and our routines. And it's important to welcome the new, I think, right now.
Yeah.
And the new things that we're putting into place will have reverberations and echoes out into perhaps even the distant future here.
Mhm.
Um, and you and I are both going through things where we're trying to establish new home bases on some level. You know, you're building your house and moving, and I'm in the process of purchasing a house. So those are big changes that last a long time. So I'm feeling that energy, and I also think that as a collective, I've seen a lot of people who have. It's almost like the karmic decks are being cleared so that we can make these new starts. And there's been some losses. You know, you and I have talked to. I lost my mom a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
so and it's something where sometimes I think for us to move forward, we have to kind of release the past and come to terms with that. And I'm feeling that and I'm seeing that with people. And one of the things I talked about the last time I was live is that life, it does not always function in complete polarizations. It's not always just black or white. It's not always yin or yang. There are definitely gradations along the way, and we can experience really challenging things and really wonderful things simultaneously.
Mhm.
Oh, like that's something that's really been surprising to me as I've gotten older. It's like, wow, this really difficult thing is happening, but also this really wonderful thing at the same time. And like, you have to hold those dualities, right?
Yeah, I feel that really deeply in my own life because I'm a Taurus rising and I'm a Scorpio sun. And
Yeah.
so I feel like I live that all the time of this dance between things can be simple and pure, and yet they're also really dark, and they can be complex and mysterious and complicated. And like,
Yeah.
how do we reconcile with that at the same time? And I love that you use the word new, because I feel like for such a simple word that really encompasses a lot of what this eclipse could be for us. Doing a little just like research on this eclipse point, we haven't had an eclipse at 10 degrees of Taurus for, I think it's been over 60 years, and we won't
Wow.
have another eclipse at 10 degrees of Taurus until 2041. So, you know, this is a really special eclipse, and it really is signifying something new that is opening up for us.
What was the date on the last 10-degree one? What was going on at
Oh man.
that period of time?
Well, I'd have to take a look. I'd have to,
Yeah.
let's see. I'll have to go back through my notes here, which I'm not seeing at the top of my head. Yeah, I don't know, but I did write down that this is part of the 6N Saros cycle,
Okay.
which began May 5th, 850
Wow. Very
at the
cool.
North Pole, and it will end in 2094. So
Wow.
what's interesting about the initial eclipse that really started this series was the sun and the moon were at 27 degrees of Taurus. Venus was in Aries for the initial eclipse,
Yeah.
and so was Uranus. Uranus was at 17 degrees of Taurus, as well as Jupiter, and the north node at that eclipse was at 10 degrees. So just kind of, it's
Yeah.
just interesting connections there.
Yeah, I love being able to connect those eclipses back to like the meta cycles. You know, I think that, you know, one thing I was looking at was, at least just in the more shorter term, we did have a new moon solar eclipse in Taurus. That's a series of eclipses around 2003 to 2004,
Mhm.
right? And then we had the south node in Taurus, that was somewhere around 2013 and 2014.
Right.
So on a smaller level, you can connect back to those. I know for me in 2003, 2004, like I was getting ready to be a dad, and now at these eclipses, my daughter is ready to go to college and, you know, move out of the house. So it's you can see the connection with that as well. It's really interesting to see.
100%.
Um,
I had my daughter during the cycle in 2013, 2014, my first child, with
yeah,
the Scorpio North Node. So definitely some similar themes that you were experiencing too. So yeah, it's interesting to kind of connect the dots in looking at past cycles in our life and to see how those things kind of repeat over time, of course, in a different way, but
Yeah.
yeah, very interesting.
100%. Remco is saying amen to the dreams being wild and extremely vivid. Lynn is joining our Midwest Love Fest, having grown up in Ohio. All right, thank you. Go Hawkeyes. X is joining us from Vancouver Island. Welcome, X. Rachel is here, I believe, from Ireland. So welcome, Rachel. Christopher is joining us and talking about Uranus being a reshuffling of the deck. And the eclipse is maybe asking us to play a different game, right? I agree, changing, shifting narratives. Okay, so I'm going to pull the chart up here, Hannah, and let's take a look at it and see what we've got. So let me get everything arranged. Okay, so here we see on the chart, if you're watching along with us today, the April 30th, 2022 eclipse at 4:28 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The sun and the moon coming together at 10 degrees of Taurus, the second decan of Taurus, which we see some significations related to the Six of Pentacles card. In this card, we have people receiving charity from maybe a person of means that's holding the scales of balance and the scales of justice. So there is some themes of charitable donations, economic justice that come along with this particular decan as well. I think that there's some other things related to rhythmic, seasonal type of experiences. And we'll get to this in a minute, but we'll talk about the Horai, which are the daimons of the seasons and the hours of the day, and they were sacred to farmers and in agricultural societies. We're dealing with the face of the moon. So the moon is in its exaltation. It's in its own face. It's a very powerful moon. So a really powerful moment for planting a seed and into very fertile ground. And with Uranus here, it is a really powerful shakeup of your rhythms, of your material routines. And then what else I wanted to point out in this chart, Hannah, is that the host of this lunation is Venus. And Venus is going to be doing something really interesting on this day. It's going to be making a conjunction with Jupiter at her degree of exaltation, roughly 27 to 28 degrees of Pisces, while also in Jupiter's house, while Jupiter is still there in his own domicile. So two extremely happy benefics coming together that are sort of having a huge influence on this eclipse. What do you think? What do you make of the Venus-Jupiter conjunction with Venus at the degree of exaltation here?
It's definitely a temperance, I feel like, to the otherwise really erratic energy of the eclipse. But it's magic. It really is magic. And, Venus in Pisces is all about the essence of things and, unifying through the essence of things. So I think there's something just really hopeful, but not just hopeful of like a wish or a dream, but remembering the magic that is possible when we take those leaps of faith and we're open to something larger than what we perceive might be just sitting in front of us.
Yeah, 100%. Where those are coming together, we see the 10 of Cups decan. And we've got this like rainbow, this very idealized vision with maybe this happy family dancing in joy, and they're exalting this rainbow. Magic is a good word for it, because I think that there's an ability to manifest a long cherished vision or dream with these two planets coming together. But also there's themes of, this decan is ruled by Mars, actually. Mm-hmm. So there's themes of what are you willing to sacrifice to make the dream come true? What are you really willing to do to achieve that vision? I know my own personal experience to get to the finish line with our home purchase. There's been some repairs and painting issues that we've had to take care of, and it's multiple days of hard physical labor. It's like, do you really want this? Like, okay, go out and like put your blood and sweat and tears into it even before it's yours. So I am I'm almost clear, so I turned into a lobster this weekend doing some painting. So yeah, that was fun. But again, for all of you out there, there may be something, a long cherished vision or dream that you have, and that there may be some kind of sacrifice that needs to come into play to make the dream a reality. And again, this is not just a minor dream. These are like, big lifelong things that we're experiencing here. That's why, even though it's not a super malefic eclipse, it could have like really very much long-standing reverberations that we're experiencing.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add that this decan T. Susan Chang refers to as chasing rainbows.
Yeah.
And I love how she describes, when we talk about the Mars influence here, of where fire meets water, the sun meets rain. And what happens when, the sun meets rain, you have a rainbow, and how beautiful and magical that is. You can still see through a rainbow. You can perceive what's on the other side, but it's colored or tinted by something that just feels otherworldly and almost impossible, but yet there it is right in front of you.
Mhm.
But I think the other thing to remember is that rainbows are momentary.
Yeah.
It's magic that then dissolves, and you're again faced with, the clearing of a storm and, everything that happens after that. And so I think there is also the reminder with Venus and Jupiter here at 27 degrees of Pisces to make the most of these fleeting magical moments, because as we know, the wheel is always turning. And so when you see that magic, pause, again, feel the essence of that. How is that speaking to you? And how can you hold on to that magic for a moment that you can then infuse that inspiration into something larger or long-term in your life?
Yeah. That's a great point. And I think that thinking about it, like enjoying that beautiful, balanced, ephemeral moment without forgetting that it's only a beginning, right? It's a new moon. It's just the start of a much longer journey. The work might be coming. Like anybody I'm not a homeowner yet, but I'm starting to understand that it's not just you buy the house and you're like, yay, I'm done. It's a continual process, and there's maintenance, there's upkeep, there's work that goes along with it. So whatever dream that we're manifesting right now, you're going to have to, go into maintenance mode at some point and deal with the reality of the dream rather than just the beautiful rainbow vision of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And the end of Pisces is a culmination, but I also feel like this energy is very clearing. There's a clearing that happens when we get to the end of this cycle, the end of the zodiac, before we move into Aries. And both of these planets are going to be moving into their new beginning and a fresh start that we're also going to be experiencing. So I do think that this is also a moment to pause, but also to realize, what are you keeping here? Like, what's going to stay behind, and what are you carrying forward into this next journey with you?
Yeah. Yeah. And we've got people in the chat that are pointing out a lot about Pluto here. And as you were saying earlier, Pluto is retrograding as we speak, stationing retrograde, and will be retrograde by the time this eclipse comes. So there probably was or will be, or we are in process of a great purging as well to be able to make room for maybe the new start that we're going to be experiencing here. So, and I think that a lot of people I've seen have been going through that process where, many things that have been either repressed or many narratives that maybe have outlived their usefulness in our lives are needing to be let go of. And sometimes that can be a painful part of change in a process. I was thinking about this, Hannah. I wonder if you have some thoughts. I know you do. Like you get that beautiful Jupiter, Uranus, and in Sagittarius. Right, right. You have Jupiter
Got it.
conjoined your. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
My memory's still serving me. Okay.
Yes.
Uh, so my thought was, human beings are. My viewpoint is that they don't really super enjoy change. That we would prefer the status quo, even sometimes when it's bad. And this may be a reason why we see eclipses as these quote unquote malefic events, because they do herald change. They do herald new circumstances, differences than what we were used to. How do you, and then that can also be liberating though, can it? Where we say like, maybe they're not just bad things happening, maybe they're just different things. And we are ascribing good or bad to it by our uncomfortableness with the change, right? What do you what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think
Yeah.
for as much as we like to say, I'm welcoming this season of change into my life. Oh, that's a nice thought. Are you really welcoming
Right.
like, what, and it could be something as mundane and simple as like starting a new exercise routine. I mean, how many people know how challenging that can be? I mean, hello.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's like, oh, the idea is nice, but to actually put your feet forward and to start to make those tangible steps. Again, we're talking about earth energy here.
Yeah.
Creating that change and moving our physical being, our physical vessels through that process of change and everything that kind of ripples out from that is hard, because so much of that is also outside of our control. And what do humans love more than the status quo is control, So,
Yeah.
change also is asking us to kind of take our hands off the steering wheel a little bit. And that can be really, really hard. So
Well,
yeah.
especially Taurus too, right? Which is one of the most fixed kind of places. It's the element that's the slowest. It's the type of things that we look at for our super fundamental foundation and backbone. And when those things are getting shook up with Uranus here and with the eclipse and with all of these things, that can be just very disorientating. I think that's the word that makes a lot of sense for me here, is we just kind of like looking around like, oh my God, what is happening? Where am I? Like
100%. You're talking to Taurus rising. I mean, control issues. Hello.
Yeah. I was thinking about you because isn't this eclipse is really like very close to one of your angles, isn't it? Like
It's right. My ascendant is 10 degrees of Taurus.
oh my God.
Yeah, it's exact within 12 minutes of my ascendant.
Wow.
And so yeah, it's a major one for me. But I think something to remember is that wherever this eclipse is falling for you in your chart, Uranus has been present there for years at this point. And so these are shakeups and shifts. I kind of think of it as like tectonic plates that are moving. Again, we're talking about the earth here, an earthquake that we've been preparing for in some sense of that, whether it's been more at a subconscious level or not. Uranus had moved over my ascendant last year, and that felt really shocking to me. Now I feel like now that Uranus is in my first house, it feels more of like I'm ready to embody these changes. I'm ready to just own these things. And it takes that kind of initial shock value that Uranus is so famous for, I think, sometimes to just jolt us out of that dreamy state of just things being the way that they are. And I think that that's kind of the counterbalance to a lot of this Pisces energy. I mean, I think of Uranus, a lot of people talk about it being like the lightning bolt from heaven. I think of Uranus, or at least how it functions in my life, is that really annoying alarm clock that you were not prepared for, and you were in a really good dream and you were getting to a good part. And then it's like, oh crap, and you're just kind of disoriented for a moment of like, where am I? What time is it? And then you kind of settle into this new reality that you're waking up into. And, and Uranus also, is the great awakener. So however you want to explore that in your own life, there is something that we're waking up to and beginning to acclimate ourselves into that new reality.
Well, and I love the point that you make that these changes have been coming for a while. It's not just like you push a button on Saturday and everything's different. You feel it. You felt it, the build up to this deep down in your intuitive nature or your gut, you probably know that there's some circumstances in your life, like I'm talking collectively here, that really do need a change.
Right.
And we, sometimes we try to hold on to things that really don't bring us vitality anymore. And Uranus just is like, come on, let it go. Let it go. Don't worry, you'll land on your feet. Like, here is a reflection of who you really are now versus
Mhm.
who you were before.
Right.
And when you get liberated from that old narrative and you allow yourself to be who you are in the present, man, that's actually a huge gift. That's a huge benefit, to be able to just live an authentic life rather than one based on some old form that isn't serving you. I mean, think about like these eclipses. If we talk about them as serpents and as dragons, like with the head of the serpent, the severed head with Rahu, the north node, and the body, Ketu. Think about this as the snake shedding skin, right?
Mhm.
Like it's when they're going through it, it's like painful. But if you try to stay and keep yourself small, I mean, that's not serving you. And look at how beautiful and shiny and new all those scales are when you get to emerge from that old skin on some
Yeah.
level, right?
I think that's just the summation of the axis between, Taurus and Scorpio. And that is, I think of that axis as the axis of alchemy, really, because
Mm,
Taurus is the alchemy of light that takes place as the sun meets the earth and creates organic and biological power.
right.
Whereas, Scorpio is the alchemy that takes place during the process of decomposition and things breaking
Mm,
down, and, everything that's really happening under the surface. And, yeah, the shedding of the skin is something that I'm constantly reminding myself of, and that it's okay to change. In fact, I have a snake tattooed
nice.
on my arm to just
Hold on,
remind
hold on.
myself of
I'm gonna let people see that bigger. Very nice.
that.
Very
My
cool.
snake.
Is that
Yeah,
a Luna moth?
I have a Luna moth and
Cool.
strawberries and flowers. It's very Taurian for a
Yeah,
Taurus
yeah, yeah.
tattoo.
Cool.
Got my little garden. But yeah, it is necessary, because you can otherwise feel really trapped by
Right.
something that is just no longer feeding or serving you.
Absolutely. Um, all right. I want to take a moment to acknowledge a few people that have stopped in. Just saying hello to Lisa Newcomb joining us from New York. Always has some great thoughts here. Sunchild Tarot, aka D, is joining us from the UK. I'm glad that you are making it here, my friend. Let's see, any other new faces that we're seeing here? Uh, Kate is blowing some purple-hearted love to us here today with on the wind. So thank you, Kate. Let's see. Yeah. So Stars in Harmony Oracle is here. Welcome. So yeah, we've just got a lot of good participation going on in the chat. I want to just say again, thank you so much for being here today. All of you that are in this community that bring such wonderful insights into the chat and into our talks here today. That's why I love doing these live streams, because it's not just me and the guest. It's like we've got this hive mind that helps us to in real time to really kind of pinpoint things. So such a gift to have all of you here today. All right, Hannah, let's go back to the chart here after
Yeah.
we saw your beautiful tattoo. Let's
Sharing, get to know.
yeah, no, it's good. It's good. Little revealing little parts of ourselves as we go. I'm revealing my my love
True
of
alliance.
sports, my true alliances. Right? Just I might lose a few Minnesota subscribers, but that's why I brought you on here today, though. So I say, hey, me and the Vikings fans, we can still be cool.
Totally, we can
It's
totally.
just a game.
Exactly. It's just
um, all right. So we're also seeing in this chart a couple things I wanted to touch on in this chart is, we do have Mars sextiling this lunation. That's actually the closest aspect. So I'm seeing just the ability to take action on the dream as being important. Like we may feel really moved to do something with that. And then I wanted to just kind of also point out we've got Mercury moving into Gemini, where we will see it stationing and moving retrograde shortly after. And also, before that happens, there will be a Mercury cazimi at
Yeah.
0 degrees of Gemini, which is kind of blowing my mind. I think that's going to be really powerful for all sorts of new options that we may have with this eclipse. But what I wanted to ask you about specifically, and you can add some other thoughts on those other two aspects that I mentioned, but I really think that looking at it from a whole sign perspective, there still is an overcoming square from Saturn to this eclipse. What do you think about that, and how are we having to deal with some of Saturn's narrative here as well?
Well, we just can't get past Saturn and Aquarius, can we?
Right.
There's these echoes of, I think, the Saturn Uranus square that we're also going to be revisiting in this fall. But I feel like this is a time to take a look at, again, what's coming with and what's staying behind. What is, if we're really anchoring into that earthy piece with this eclipse, with our resources, how are we using or mismanaging those resources, especially as it relates to a dream that we're trying to manifest? You know, it could be as simple as like our money. How are we spending that right now? But it could also be in relation to how hard do we feel like we're working towards that? You know, are you overworking yourself right now? Are you pushing yourself too far? I mean, after all, this eclipse is in the territory of Venus. So do you need to be more receptive and allowing? Or, you know, do you need to be taking greater responsibility as well for your actions and the I don't want to say the consequences, but how those actions could have implications to your community, to your society, to your groups, to this larger collective as well. So
yeah, definitely. So we've got 7 of Swords here for where Saturn's at in Aquarius 3. And all of the things you're saying about Saturn are resonating as far as like being responsible, working within potentially some limitations that we have here. Because it's not unfettered growth, right? It's like, all right, you've got to plant a seed, you've got this beautiful Venus Jupiter thing, but there's also these other considerations that are maybe even bigger than you or your desires that have to be taken into account as well. And I think that, Saturn in Aquarius, one of the things I've been really meditating on with this, and this was from an author, Joy Usher, that has really turned my mind around on a number of planets and signs through her book, A Tiny Universe. And she talks about Aquarius as being the glass ceiling energy, right? Where it's like this energy of mental limitations that we create, like through telling ourselves we can or cannot do something. So I think that decan in particular is about untying some of those old narratives and stories that stop us from manifesting what we truly desire. So I really think that part of this eclipse also could be, hey, which old stories are still keeping you in that place of feeling of limitation, and but which ones are necessary? Which of those stories are necessary and which ones aren't, right?
Right. And to echo that Saturn energy, the North Node for this eclipse is in the 3rd decan of Taurus, which is Saturn ruled. And so there is kind of also just that underlying Saturnian influence about patience, that things of quality and of a lasting nature and even of beauty sometimes take a long time to create and to organize. And sometimes things need to be adjusted and reworked in some way. And there was a quote, I can't remember if it came from T. Susan Chang's book or Bernadette Brady's, but there was something about Saturn in relation to with Taurus too, about life without limits is unprotected. And when we think about growth in Taurus, right, fertile ground, beings that are just freshly being born, tiny creatures that are still quite vulnerable, there's also a need to protect that. Yet we don't want to completely, shelter them from experiencing the world, but that life is still something that is worth having some limitations, or at least knowing when is enough. When is it enough, or how much is enough? And I think that's such an important Saturn question as it relates to Taurus, because Taurus can be excessive and greedy and wasteful at times too. Is thinking,
and especially with Venus and Jupiter coming together at the
right,
Venus's degree of exaltation, it could be easy to get in over your head, right? If
totally,
without that Saturn influence.
yeah. So I don't know. I think there are stuff that I disagree with that. I think it's important of old limitations that are keeping you from growth, but still also being respectful of the growth in the sense that we have to care for and nurture it with an eye for responsibility and longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that all of the planetary influences and impulses, they're all about maintaining some kind of, I guess the word I would call it would be homeostasis, right? Some kind of balance of nature. You have unchecked growth that can turn into something malefic, right? If you don't have the boundaries, if you don't have Saturn and Mars recycling some of the old energy and setting healthy limitations. So, yeah, working with that energy. And I think you're touching on a really important point when it comes to patience, because we're just starting this big new material cycle, this new rhythmic cycle. And Rome wasn't built in a day, right? It takes maintenance. That's one thing I want to point out about this eclipse is its second decan of Taurus. The superpower in that decan is consistency. It's showing up and doing just what is necessary and then letting nature assist you, right? Like that's what Venus to me is like being receptive to the forces of nature, but also participating in it as well. The I-Ching was talking about this today too, the receptivity nature that we'll get to at one point in the show here, but really working and opening up to the energy rather than forcing things. And Saturn is a planet that's like, you're not going to force anything because it'll stop you right in your tracks, right? Hannah, I'm going to look through the chat here. Thank you, Eilish, for the super sticker with the lemon grab there. Like from, I think is that lemon grab from Adventure Time? Are you familiar with Adventure Time, Hannah?
No.
It's a pretty surrealistic cartoon. Lemon grab is this character. It's like had this really screechy voice. But, I don't know if that's a reference to that, Eilish, but thank you so much for your contribution here today. Rachel says, Taurus is in my 11th, Scorpio the 5th for me. The last few years have been super interesting in terms of finding new groups, interests, and allowing the tide to carry me to new and exciting shores. Yeah, really great insight there, Rachel, as far as that axis of, personal creativity versus the collective and the group consciousness. Henry is saying all the Mars Saturn damage is still falling apart for me with the benefits averse to Saturn in Aquarius. Benefics, with the benefics. Benefics can see the eclipse though. Isn't that good? Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, for me, I think it's great. Again, I think that the way to think about that, and Hannah, you can chime in on this too, is that we experience life sometimes with the good and the challenging all wrapped up in one thing, and we can see that in a chart. Like if you look at your natal chart or anybody's natal chart, you have some really good things that are happening alongside some very difficult things. So I think this eclipse is speaking to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always going to be a sense of polarity, when it comes to unexpected. I mean, even Uranus being in Venus territory. I mean, Venus as the goddess, she was born from, tension and a situation of detachment and severance and ultimate disruption.
Right.
But yet she's able to serve new ideas that could be received in a diplomatic or tactful way, or could be presented in a diplomatic or tactful way. And so I think having all of that Venusian temperance to what could otherwise be quite erratic, and it still probably will be, to me feels really positive and still quite hopeful.
Yeah. I like that you're bringing in the origin story of Aphrodite or Venus here, because Uranus is part of that, right? With Kronos taking his sickle, aka Saturn,
Mm-hmm.
the son of Uranus, okay, that was his child, taking that sickle and severing his genitals basically, and them falling into the sea. And from that, those severed genitals and the sea foam, that was the birth of Aphrodite. That's what created Aphrodite, in addition to the Uranies, which was
Mm-hmm.
born from the blood, right?
Right.
Who were the punishers of hubris, right? So there was, see how both of those things can be born out of
Yeah.
that single act. So
Right.
I love sitting in the ambiguity, like with this.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
from a practical standpoint, at least what I think the lesson with Uranus and these changes that we're all going to be experiencing in some place in our life is that if we are to repress or suppress or block these reinventions that are being requested of us by Uranus, we can experience, like you're saying, the Furies, as they're also
Right.
known, which were created by the blood as they, the dismembered member of
Yeah.
Uranus by Kronos. And that can be experienced as resentment and
Yes.
retaliation and even never endingness, right? Nothing would
Right.
ever change and it just being infinitely the same. And how boring would that be? And I think that story is also kind of infused into this ongoing Saturn Uranus conversation too, that the Furies can be born within us if we are repressing changes that are necessary and timely in our lives, or if we are more embracing of those changes, we can also expect that those Furies can be hurled at us from those outside Saturnian forces. So
Yeah.
something to kind of just also keep in mind, that is, and this is something that I'm just sharing from personal experience with
Sure.
Uranus coming over my ascendant last year, is that I finally had to realize that the tension and disruption in my life could either be self-caused by me not embracing where I was in my life and how I've changed, or I could embody that and have a sense of inner peace and contentment and deal with other people not understanding it, but
Mm.
feeling still whole in myself. So if there are people that are also experiencing challenges in their relationships right now, which I feel like has been a huge theme over the last couple of years too, especially if coming back to the Venusian storyline and her retrograde at the beginning of the year and her meetings with Pluto, there's a lot that's changed in terms of the things that are important to us and what we define as living a good life. And so as
Our
we're
values, right?
exactly. So as we're experiencing these shakeups, are you going to welcome them in, right? And to see the potential magic and to accept that, yeah, some people aren't going to understand it and that's okay. Or
Mm.
try to maintain the status quo, knowing that it's going to just eat you up inside.
Man, good stuff, Hannah. Really good stuff. And yeah, that really resonates with me. I feel like one of the things I've been working with lately, I've got some astrological materia that's related to Regulus. And one of the things that that particular election works with is feeling a sense of self-esteem and self-confidence and calmness that isn't necessarily dependent on external approval, which
Mhm.
states in the description of its uses will actually magnetize external approval. It's funny, that paradox, right? When we finally stop like giving a shit what
Yeah,
people think about us,
100%. Yeah.
people are like, oh wow, this person doesn't really care what I think about them. Man, they're cool.
Yeah.
So it's
Carry
like,
on. Yeah.
right, like, well, because it makes you sort of impervious to that any kind of criticism potentially that would tear you down. Like, and that's, man, that's some real power right there. Is when you know that you are feeling confident enough in who you are and what you're all about, that someone else isn't going to take that away from you just because of some disapproval. And the other thing I'll say about that is that oftentimes people, the way that they feel secure is by putting other people in either a category or
Mhm.
or being able to characterize them in a certain way so that they themselves feel safe. And when
Right.
when we make important changes in our life, we make people feel either unsafe or insecure because we're shaking up their vision of who we should be to them.
Mm-hmm.
And and when we can just be like, well, that's just life, and our relationship is going to change as well. That's when we can really have grace with each other and allow each other the space to shed skin, to have a new version of ourselves, to come to terms with change. And I will say to all of you out there, please remember that fact, because a lot of the times the disapproval is just a projection of the box that they had put you in to make themselves feel safe.
Yeah, which is definitely, at least in my opinion, the shadow side of Saturn in Aquarius is putting people in boxes based on sociopolitical beliefs and, all of those little minutiaes, if that makes us feel more comfortable when we can put people in categories. And not to get too ahead of ourselves, but Uranus is going to be meeting up with the sun a couple of days or a few days after this eclipse. And I feel like that really amplifies what you were just talking about, Spencer, of that being a time when we are going to have to develop and expand ourselves into new uncharted territory, right? We're exploring parts of ourselves, or we're being asked to explore parts of ourselves that maybe we haven't before, or doing it in ways that we haven't done before. And existing structures or relationships may need to go in order for us to really authenticate and embody, such a Taurus word, embody who we really are and more of who we're becoming.
Yes. And we're having some really good acknowledgement of that type of energy in the chat here too. Beth, sorry, I've got painters here like doing some work. I've been taking care of the bottom stories, but I wasn't brave enough to go up on the third story ladder to scrape and paint. So I delegated that. Like, so if there's some noise going on here. But anyway, Beth is here, EK, and also a Taurus rising, and kind of talking about enjoying that description of Uranus on the ascendant here, Hannah. And yes, we are going to see a conjunction between the sun and Uranus, a mere few days after this eclipse. And one of the things that I wanted to point out about Taurus in general is in Aries season, we have Mars severing and separating a singular point of consciousness from the collective and saying, this is who I am and this is what I believe. And then we take that newfound sovereignty and we infuse it into a body. We bring them and join them together. So this is the infusing part of your philosophical belief system, your hard-won individuality or individuation, and putting it into some kind of material form here as well. Mm-hmm. So, and it's going to be new. It's going to look different. And again, like, there's projections galore that could happen with that, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think we've got a pretty good understanding of what's going on in this chart. Again, I think we've touched on Mercury being in Gemini a little bit with the upcoming retrograde and Cazimi that will be happening shortly in the days afterwards. I guess my final thought on that would be that Mercury going into the first decan of Gemini is just, that's the Eight of Swords energy, where you may feel paralyzed by all the different pathways that you could potentially explore.
Yes. Choices. All the choices.
Right. Yeah. It's like, you've made this decision. Now here's all these other things to consider. So I do like the way T. Susan Chang helps us resolve that in 36 Secrets. And it's using the other eights. So like Eight of Pentacles is like, hey, get to work. You have a choice to make. Just start working on something.
Right.
Or the Eight of Cups, where it's like, you don't like the choices, walk away. Like,
that's another way to deal with it.
And the Eight of Wands, I think, was wait for change because it will come. You don't have to necessarily do anything. And then she was talking about Eight of Swords being about maybe by meditating and collecting our thoughts, we're not having that kind of that chatter going on too much, so we can focus on what is really important to us. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm going down the list here. We've hit some good parts of this. I think the next thing I've got on my list is just talking a little bit about Taurus II in general,
Yeah.
and just maybe getting a little bit more in depth in that. As we were talking about before, we've got the Six of Pentacles card, which is called the Lord of Material Success in Book T, or the Lord of Success in the Book of Thoth. Austin Coppock calls it a Linga Yoni in 36 Secrets, which is this fertility stone that sort of looks like this. And he talks a lot about seeding the fertile soil, like you were talking about with the very fecund and ripe soil. And then I wanted to discuss with you the Horai, the spirit of the second decan of Taurus. The Horai were these goddesses, these three goddesses, Eunomia, Irene, and Dike, which roughly translates to good order, good pasture, peace and spring, and justice. And they were responsible for the regular motion of things and the hours of the seasons. How do you think we can incorporate the challenges of the Horai and into our life and embrace that spirit of Taurus too?
With the cycles you talking about?
I think so. Like, how can we utilize that spirit for success in this upcoming eclipse?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes into that Venusian space of receptivity, also of just acknowledging where we're at, not trying to force things to be something that it's not. And, when it comes to cycles, that's something that I feel like I've gotten quite familiar with being a mother. And, there are different phases that children go through as they're growing and developing. And you probably are very familiar with this too, Spencer, but it's understanding kind of the appropriateness of whatever that season or that cycle or that rhythm that you're currently in is calling for. And if you're applying, work or action or energy towards something that just can't be manifested in that way at that time, there's a respect that's needed to just allow it to be where it's at that moment. So I do think that it's just kind of embracing the here and the now, which to me it very much feels, kind of the epitome of a lot of that higher octave of Taurus is like being here now, like being in this moment. And what is it calling for you? And, animals are so good at that. They're so good at knowing what their bodies or what they need in that moment and nothing more, and just respecting kind of where they're at and not overcomplicating that as well.
Well, Hannah, you definitely are the perfect guest for this, and all of you out there in digital land here today, I think you're in good hands with the two of us today, because my moon is in this decan of Taurus, and Hannah has her ascendant here. We've lived this energy for our entire life, and I will say, 100% agree that you look to nature, look to the way that there is interconnectedness, and like an animal in a community is going to do what is necessary for that moment. They're gonna hunt their food. They're gonna gather their food, but then they're going to rest. They're going to maybe not push the river on some level. And I think that balance is really important, which brings in one of the sephira of the Kabbalistic tree of life, which is the middle pillar of three pillars, where we have, it's called Tiferet. So the sixes in the tarot is Tiferet, which is related to the sun and balance. So we're trying to balance out hard work. We're trying to balance out rest and play and pleasure. I like the fact that I think that I've seen with you, and I think both of us are able to do this, is when you have some Taurus II placements, which is the exaltation of the moon, it's kind of like showing up. You just keep showing up, and you do what you need to do in that day. You don't force it, and then you rest, and then you show up again. It's consistency, right? And has that been, because that's helped me succeed. Has that been true for you as well? Like the consistency part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. In both my business and just my life in general, and just a little a little something about me is that I'm a military spouse.
Yeah.
And something that I've reflected on as we are getting ready to move is my oldest daughter is having a lot of anxiety about leaving her friends and, starting over in a new place and, the challenges that come with that. She's 8. And I was reflecting with my husband how the majority of her life has been periods of constant change and instability. Matt, my husband, was deployed for 6 months when my daughter Barrett was 3 months old for the first time.
Wow.
And he's been deployed over the course of a total of 3 years in her 8 years of life. And so she's only kind of understood life as a series of hellos and goodbyes. And yet, as a mother for the first time, I was also really struggling with, like, how do I raise a child on my own while my husband is gone? And also to, when he comes home, to kind of reacclimate to being together. And something that I just really anchored and rooted into was my daily routines. Mm-hmm. And having a child, having a baby really kept me centered and grounded because, children need very little, honestly. I think our modern culture overcomplicates what children actually truly need. Maybe babies need, that I would wake up to feed her. And she was what got me out of bed in the morning. She was what helped me stay consistent about the basic stuff that postpartum can kind of take away from you, like drying your hair and, even taking showers and just making sure you're eating enough and all of that stuff. And so having those consistent routines and just continuing to show up for my daughter, but also for myself, helped to keep me in that space of, I'm just going to tackle today. And then I'm going to see about tomorrow. I'm not going to worry about, how I'm going to get through this next 5.5 months. I'm just going to worry about getting through today. And that's something that was such a deep lesson for me that I've carried then over into now with this next move and also with my business, and not worrying about, well, what's my business going to look like financially in 3 years? Right. I've got some goals, but I'm going to focus on what am I going to get done today that's going to help me build towards, something tomorrow and, next week. And that's really all that we have, truly, is just this moment anyway.
I love it. And yeah, so it sounds like your situation was forcing you into becoming that consistent presence, and it made it that much more important that you were the consistent mom that was showing up. And that's a lot of what kids need. They don't need fancy stuff. They just need our presence consistently, and like they need sleep and food and cuddles every once in a while. That's the Taurus thing. Like you just need, fundamentals. Like it's fairly low on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But if you go without those things, it's difficult, right? So,
right.
This is something I've had to work with my daughter as well. Trying to help create stability for her is teaching her the value of, hey, did you eat today? Like, did you eat something healthy? Did you get enough sleep? Are you drinking enough water? Did you exercise? Like little things like that can really add up. And I know for me, I also have a number of routines that I go through in the morning. Like I have a certain meditation prayer practice that I do every morning. I make a shake every morning, like a protein, superfood shake. And I do this, I've done this every day for like 15 years. So like it is the same thing that I journal. And then, I'm like, all right, I'm ready for my day.
Yeah.
The flip side of that with Uranus here, though, and I wanted to point this out because this is a conversation I've had with my own lovely daughter lately, is she has taken that to heart to the point where the two of us really hate getting out of our routines and will stubbornly adhere to them even when there is a crisis point that is necessitating a surge of energy. So the lesson that she and I have been dealing with lately is that sometimes it is important to establish these routines. There are periods of time where you do have to be flexible enough to make a push to achieve a long cherished goal. And you will have to make some compromises with those routines. Yeah. Now, I don't think that you should neglect all of those things altogether. But I guess I wanted to play devil's advocate and see, like, this is my, Gemini Venus and saying, oh, what about this other thing? But does that make sense too? Like, have you found times where there is a time in your life where you're like, okay, I know I have these things that I want to do, but this is my priority for the moment. I like what you're talking about with the moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is, sometimes it is reprioritizing. And
Mhm.
we've had to deal with this topic also as it relates to my kids, especially my oldest. And she has ADHD. And so she really thrives on a structure, and she
Yeah.
feels the most settled. And I do too. But there are some times where change is unavoidable or plans cancel, and
Yeah.
she'll get so disappointed or upset. And it's having to explain, I realize that's not what she wanted in this moment. How can we still work with this scenario? Or how can we pivot and move in a different direction that still feels okay? And, changing up those routines and rhythms and systems can feel unsettling, but it can also be an opportunity for us to see something that we didn't see before. If you think about it simply as like walking down the same path every single day, if you have the same routine that you drive to work every single day, you're comfortable. You kind of have landmarks. You're able to navigate probably like with your eyes closed, right?
Yeah.
And then if you have to take a new way because suddenly there's road construction, there's a detour, it's like, oh, I'm not really sure where I'm going here. But then,
It's
I
Uranus.
noticed.
Uranus detour.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you see, there's like a coffee shop that I didn't know existed. Oh, there's a beautiful park. Like there are things that come into your awareness that you didn't even know existed that now are suddenly a possibility that you're like, maybe I should go this way and to see what happens. And so there is a request to kind of experiment, I think, when we're talking about Uranus with these very Taurus kind of fixed qualities of the status quo, or like kind of those routines of day old and the same thing every single day, like you were talking about. Maybe you need to just have avocado toast one morning and see how you feel, Spencer.
Maybe
You'll be a new man.
I know. I'd spend a small fortune on all these powders that go into this stupid shake that I make all the time, and maybe I'll have to buy some paint for the living room at some point with the new responsibilities. But
Yeah.
no, and I think what that brings me back to is really, I think the key that we're getting towards here is routines are important, and self-care is important, but even routines benefit from moderation, right? I think that moderation is really the key. That was something that came up in our upcoming I-Ching. Is the middle path is really important. Sometimes you can even get too fixed and saying too stubborn in our routines and saying, no, it has to be like this, and I'm not going to be flexible in this moment. And learning from the Tao and Taoism, about sometimes when we go to an extreme, the seed of its opposite is planted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go too routine focused, what you're going to do is create a chaotic moment in the future if you're getting too fixated on that.
Right. You suck the potential life out of something.
Right. The spontaneity.
Yeah. Well, even just from like an agricultural standpoint, growing up in Minnesota, my dad grew up on a farm, and he worked in the Department of Agriculture for a while when I was growing up. And something that I remember him telling me was that something that's essential to agriculture is constantly changing the crops that you're growing in your fields every year. So you don't want to grow corn in the same field or soybeans in the same fields every single year, because that plant is going to essentially suck the nutrients out of the soil. And so the soil becomes depleted. So what do? You rotate those crops so that, maybe you have soy one year. And so those help to kind of counterbalance or impart different kinds of, minerals or nutrients back into the soil so that it's fertile and has that element of.
So you're saying I need to rotate a new breakfast.
You do. You do.
To keep my body guessing.
Yeah. But, it's to help, again, looking at long-term progress. There is something that needs to be shaken up in order growth and life to continue. And I think that's important, and it can be hard, but it's necessary for sure.
I'll tell you one thing though that is a consistent in my diet, and this came from my 106-year-old grandma that lived to be 106 years old. I said, "Grandma, what's the secret?" My great grandma, and she's like, "Dark chocolate." So I have this raw cacao dark chocolate powder that goes in my shake every morning. So I'm fueled by dark chocolate without the sugar, right? And I'm a firm believer in that and the happy brain chemicals that it brings up. So But yeah, maybe shake it up a little bit, right? Maybe
Yeah.
like some new fruits or something. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, I'm looking through the chat here, seeing what we've got. It's a lot of wonderful comments. It's a really active chat here, and I'm sorry if I can't get to every single comment here. I wanted to highlight a few. Thank you, Lisa, for the super chat. I really appreciate the support today. Rachel's saying, glad to hear you have some support, some help, Spencer. Can't host a deep dive astro conference and paint at the same time. Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised, Rachel. That's exactly what I've been trying to do over the last few weeks, trying to manage an astrology business, all the housing things, and at the same time trying to process and talk with family members about the transition with a loss as well. So that's one thing that I've been trying to stress here the last few weeks is sometimes life happens like this, and there's a lot of things happening at once, and we're not going to be perfect all the time. When our life is pulled in a lot of different directions, sometimes there's compromises that have to be made. But that's why I bring wonderful, knowledgeable people like Hannah on here to carry a lot of the load here. I'm really enjoying talking to you, Hannah. I'm
Thank you.
constantly pleasantly surprised by your insights and your groundedness and your earthiness and your knowledge and wisdom when you come on. So,
Oh, I
um,
appreciate that.
okay.
Especially because when people give me the feedback that they think I'm cool, calm, and collected,
Yeah.
my hot mess Scorpio sun is like, great. We are
Right.
everyone.
Right. You're like, yay! You're like,
Fantastic. Yeah.
like the little mask comes off. Like, oh boy. Okay. Let's see. Beth is saying a traitor or a teaser. Yeah, maybe a teaser for the Taurus Decans class. Yes, teaser. Yes. Hold on, I'm looking. Man, so many comments. Thank you so much for your participation today. One thing I'll say too, in addition to all these wonderful comments, make sure you're hitting that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. That is super helpful. Rachel says, as children, we knew how to do just that. I have Chiron in Taurus, and I've been really late coming to terms with my own rhythms and cycles and needs. Yeah, I mean, that's something we learn as we get older, right? Sometimes we get in situations when we're younger where we're giving up those rhythms and routines because we feel like we have to or owe it to somebody, or we had a traumatic situation we're trying to compensate for. Let's see. Remco is taking off. Take care, Remco. Good to see you here. Anything else that you're seeing? Are you seeing anything in the chat here? Any questions we've got things people that are talking about rotating crops. So we're getting some good stuff with that. Routines are regularly reviewing. I eat some dark chocolate every day after breakfast. Yay, Rachel. She's on the dark chocolate team. Yeah, I'm a big believer in it. Actually, I really do think that dark chocolate is the ultimate superfood. Again, dark chocolate though, without all the sugar involved. Yeah. The sugar is counterproductive. So if you can limit your sugar, that's a good thing.
Follow us for more gardening and health tips.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I think we've kind of covered the daimons, the Sephira. Let's bring our chart back up here, and let's finish off our talk today with a couple more astrological things where we'll just touch on a few upcoming things. Mm-hmm. We do have the first quarter moon is happening on the 8th, and in between the eclipse and the first quarter moon, we're going to see Venus moving into Aries, her exile, ruling that Taurus sun now instead of the exalted Venus. And then we've got the Sun-Uranus conjunction that you were talking about on the 5th of May. Mm-hmm. And then the first quarter moon in Leo. What do you think about some of these shifting sands here that we have over the course of the first week of the month or so?
Well, this is kind of an interesting one because the moon is opposite Mars. So, we could feel a little bit restless. There could be some emotional stuff that maybe we're kind of fighting with, maybe we're wading through. And I mean, the nodes too are still within orb of squares here. So, I think there's a lot of review about action, about how we're going to move ahead, especially of whatever is kind of coming to light, coming to the surface over the solar eclipse, which I don't know, my intuitive feeling about it with this one in particular is that we probably have a sense of maybe the bigger picture changes that are coming up for us. And so maybe this is more of a strategizing point of, okay, what's my next step? What action am I taking? And where am I still feeling a little hesitant about embodying those changes, welcoming those changes? But there could also be room for, more immediate surprise too. And like, how are we going to just respond to that?
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting really close to the Mercury shifting directions here at 4 degrees Gemini, right? So we're
Stationing that day? I can't remember.
it's like the
No.
10th, I think.
Okay, so
Yeah, it's close.
yeah,
Yeah, it's getting close. And we've got the moon here in that second decan of Leo. Um, yeah, I like what you're saying about embodying these changes. Like, I think this goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about when we're making material changes in our life and shedding skin, we take on new identities, and really like maybe getting comfortable with our new identity, maybe part of this square with the Leo moon and the Taurus sun here, and saying, well, what is our authentic self, and where do our values lie now that we have made this big change? How do people respond to us now? How do we create integrity between the inner and the outer experience that we have? Because when we're taking on new challenges, new personas, new responsibilities, we're not always going to get it 100% right away, because it's new. We've never done it before. We're not able to draw upon experience with this new thing. So I think that there may be some times where we may make a few mistakes, and that's okay. That's life, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's our first quarter moon, and you were pointing out we've got an opposition here with Saturn and then Mars that's going to be happening here, and then we are going to be seeing Mercury stationing retrograde at 4 degrees of Gemini on the 10th, while also simultaneously going under the beams of the sun. So maybe more of our communications are happening behind the scenes potentially. We're having to rework some things that maybe we didn't get right the first time, and also like review our options. And you were saying that we are getting back to, how are you describing the retrograde back into Taurus?
It's kind of figuring out, all right, what do we do with these ideas that we've kind of reprocessed and reviewed and re-envisioned some way? Now, how are we going to make that tangible and practical, and how are we going to manifest those ideas?
Yeah.
So I do feel like it is a good opportunity to think about moving from the head back into the physical body, or moving from the spaciousness of the intelligence into the material world. And I'll just say in general, I feel like that's a real gift of the Mercury retrogrades this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people give Mercury retrograde a really hard time. I'm someone that I quite like Mercury retrogrades, because I feel like it's a really poignant opportunity to connect with your intuition and to cut out a lot of the chatter and really ask yourself some important questions about, how do I feel about this? What matters to me? Does this make sense? Do I need to make some, do I need to amend some past decisions or mistakes that I've made? And then what am I going to do with that? Right? That's always the question of the earth signs, is like, what are you going to do? How are you going to make it happen? What resources do you have at your disposal? And especially with Taurus, we're talking about our gifts and our talents, and also our material assets of like, all right, these ideas we've kind of narrowed down, like what makes sense to us. What's at my disposal to be able to then make something happen, to make something grow?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think that one little addition I'll add to third decan Taurus, that it was coming up as you were talking about that, is third decan Taurus to me is some of the things that threaten our crops. It's like the forces that are out of our control, the natural disasters, the plagues, the pestilence, the like mold or something like that. Mm-hmm. So to me, there's something where maybe there was forces that were out of our control at one point, and that we need to go redo something to take care of maybe something that was done a little bit quicker than we wanted to do it. I know in my experience, exterior painting is very reliant on the rain,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So there's been some challenges in my own experience about timing and methodology because of rain happening, and there's a part of me that's like, oh man, am I gonna have to go back and redo some of this because of slapping some paint on wet wood or something because we're under a deadline. But those are some things that would come to mind, and Mercury is going to be retrograding back into that kind of square with Saturn, so coming to terms with some of our limitations that we might have, right? That we may have rashly gone through something the first time around, and now we have the opportunity to, I guess, quote unquote, repent. We have the litai associated with that decan, which were those old hobbled women that followed behind ate or rashness, that offered up repentant prayers. So having some faith in your processes is good, I think, as well. Okay, let's see. Everybody loves dark chocolate. Yes, thank you. If anybody ever wants to send me a gift, chocolate is a good one. So
Buy me a coffee, buy me a
yeah,
chocolate.
buy me a chocolate. That's what I should do, because you can actually change what it's called. It's like, buy me some chocolate. That's great.
No,
Oh
it
man.
has to be dark chocolate.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna do that. I'm totally, because I don't drink coffee. I if I have any caffeine, it's like maybe some mate every once in a while. But my caffeinated thing of choice is dark chocolate. Okay. Venus entering Aries may be a good time to give yourself permission to love yourself too. Yeah, I agree. Self-love is important. Glad to hear someone else has a productive insights in Mercury retrograde. Yeah, I mean, every cycle has has opportunities within it. When people are saying that an aspect is only negative, and I think that one thing I'll help uncover with that is that the astrology is bringing us just events and impulses. Your human pronoia, or your ability to make choices, your free will, if you will that sometimes can counteract and counterbalance some of the experiences that you're having. Not always. There's some things that are fated, that are out of your control, that you can't change, that you have to accept. But oftentimes when we start studying, especially traditional astrology, we get this like malaise of depression, where we're like, oh, this bad aspect is happening, this is going to be a terrible thing. Well, maybe, but it's an opportunity for you to learn something. It's an opportunity to make a different choice, or to either acquiesce to the impulse, or to do something, right? Yeah. Okay. Buy me a cacao shake. Yeah. There you go. Oh man, that's definitely, that change is definitely happening, because those shakes, man, I think if I add them up.
Your Iranian breakthrough. I love it.
Yeah, totally. All right. Okay. So let's move forward, and let's wrap this up. Do you want to just briefly touch on where we may be going with this eclipse energy?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Full moon lunar eclipse.
So we're looking at the full moon lunar eclipse on the 16th of May, right after a square with the sun and Saturn. So this lunar eclipse happens almost directly after the Sun Saturn square. So some kind of reality check, right?
Right.
What do you think about this? What are some of your brief big picture thoughts with this eclipse here that we're coming towards?
The word that I've been using to describe this one is messy.
Yeah, it's funky.
Emotionally messy. I think this is a real opportunity for emotional purging.
Yeah.
I think that if we're looking back to the solar eclipse, there's an opening, there's a realization, there's a breakthrough, there's something that's shifting and being unearthed and brought up to the surface. And like, we're dealing with that in a very like surface level way. Now, when we've got the moon in Scorpio, the moon's naturally in her fall here. She doesn't particularly like being in Scorpio, especially with the South Node. There's a lot that's being stirred up by the tail of the dragon. And I feel like collectively, this is a really important turning point for us in terms of collective healing and transmuting grief and resentment and more of those lower octave scorpionic energies that we're holding on to, things that have outlived or that are no longer in life, accepting where things have died and have ended. And again, coming back to those natural cycles of life, they're also accepting when things are no longer in form. And like, why are we holding on to them? Why are we keeping ghosts in the closet, so to speak? It's time to clear and to purge in order for those manifestations that we are so excited to welcome in to take form and to take shape in our life. I just wanted to note that looking at this eclipse, there is, of course, the ruler Mars conjunct Neptune here in Pisces, which I think adds a layer of kind of confusion or fog about how we're going to go about doing this. We had a lunar eclipse back in 2003. It was May 15th, 2003. It was a lunar eclipse at 24 degrees of Scorpio.
Okay.
So very close. And that one was ruled by Mars in Aquarius that was conjunct Neptune in Aquarius at 13 and 14 degrees.
Okay.
So I just thought that was kind of interesting. And Venus was also in Aries, although she was at 29 degrees. So I do think it's maybe helpful to take a look even back at 2003 at that time, what was going on in your life. And is there things that you've held on to since that point that really need to be released or healed or integrated to, I think of Scorpio energy as well as like transmutation. It's not just endings, but it's like, how can we give this a new life? How can we take the essence of something and allow it to take shape in another way?
Yeah. I think this eclipse is going to be a little bit more difficult than the one we're discussing earlier today. There's a lot of benefic influences in the new moon eclipse. There's a lot of tension in this one, with the moon in its fall, with the sun conjoining a fixed star called Algol, which is a difficult fixed star.
Yeah.
It on the plus side, it could be very protective if you're using it correctly, but it also can be something where our anger and our resentment could lead to some really destructive conflicts. And we have this, what's that?
I was going to say, and with Mercury being retrograde, there's also, just the potential for misguided words, and really inflicting pain via misunderstandings because we're speaking before we're ready, kind of coming back to that timing element. This may not be a good time to, open our heart and just, emotionally word vomit on someone. Maybe this is one that we really privatize more of that internal processing.
Well, and Venus being in Aries too, may have difficulty creating win-win situations and compromising with people too.
100%.
So yeah, and Mars, Neptune coming together. I always feel Neptune contacts lead to some kind of almost like a power outage. And I feel like just an energy outage there. So my feeling with this is that with Mars ruling that moon, conjoining Neptune, there's just might be an emotional exhaustion that where we're just like, we've been through so much up to this point through eclipse season. Man, I'm just tired. So that self-care becomes even more important around this period of time. And realizing that this maybe is something where you are feeling pulled in a number of different directions and giving yourself some of that extra grace, extra time, giving other people the same as well. And so, because they're going through similar challenges. And like you were saying, letting go of old forms that aren't vital anymore. That third decan of Scorpio is really related to trying to force forms to remain, and doing all sorts of nefarious things to keep something alive that just isn't, that has passed on. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. My son is in this decan, and this can also be escapism tendencies, or holding on to like obsessions, or things that we want to think are true and real, but really aren't anymore. And illusions. Yeah. What's the tarot card associated with?
It's the Seven of Cups.
It's the one with the weird mysterious looking cloth, right? That's shrouding the cups. It's a weird looking card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they related it to like the seven deadly sins too, like all
Yeah.
these like desires that we might have.
Right.
Um,
So I do think, especially with the Neptune influence, the notion of illusion, or instead of dealing with really what's going on, it's like, ooh, I'm gonna just bypass this over here and pretend everything's still good and this relationship is still alive when perhaps like it's not, it's
yeah.
and that's tough, that's tough. And I do think that there is a call for surrender here too when we're talking
Yes.
about Mars with Neptune and Pisces. I mean, that's like waving the white flag of I need to rest. I need to just surrender to what's going on and accept also here with, again, the timing of what's happened or whatever is dissipated or ended.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I will have some guest. I hope I'll schedule with a little bit more notice than the 2 days that I gave Hannah coming on here. So we'll talk about this again as we get closer to it. But this is why Hannah's so awesome. Like I know that this is what's so interesting about your Taurus Scorpio axis to me is from just my brief time of knowing you, it hasn't really been that long, but I know that I can count on you, and
Mhm.
B, you're great in a crisis. And the combination of those two things is really amazing. And that to me is like what we're trying to balance with this Scorpio Taurus axis is, can you respond in a crisis, and can you also be reliable, and bring a sense of calmness and peace to that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Well, I will say that my sun is ruled by Mars and Virgo, so we can
Nice.
figure out a plan. And my ascendant is ruled by Venus and Libra, so I'm a very Venusian individual.
Very cool. Very cool.
Want to try to please and make people happy, but hey, the
Well,
timing for today was very divine because this was the only free day that I had this week. So
yeah. Yeah. And I said, hey, how about Thursday? And you're like, yeah, okay. Like, and I seem to remember you planting this seed months and months and months ago.
perhaps I did.
Yeah, I think that you might have planted this in my subconscious, and probably just intuitively too, because it was right on your ascendant. I mean, that's what I love. What I love bringing on guests that have personal experience with the astrology that we're going to be going through, because they can really bring those anecdotal stories in that are reflective of that energy. And there's extreme value in that. There's a ton of value in being able to do that. I'm looking at the chat here. I'm seeing some side conversations here where people are asking about the reading group. And so I just want to clarify that real quick. Yeah, I'm thinking about doing a guided reading group discussion, almost like a book club for Demetra George's book, Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, Volume 2. So it might be something that is related to maybe a monthly membership tier, either on Buy Me a Cacao or or maybe YouTube memberships or something like that. But the fee won't be super expensive. I'm going to make it accessible for as many people as possible. And yeah, we'd go through that book together, maybe with some presentations, some great discussions. And I hope that all of you out there will join me for that. That is in process. That's coming soon. So just let me get past this painting week and we'll put it together. Okay, Hannah, I think we've gotten through the astrology part. Should we put a bow on this thing and get you out the door here at the time that you have?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to come in right in the wire here. So the animal that we got for today was, again, some synchronicity, was the same animal that we got the last time Hannah was here.
Yeah.
The stick insect.
Bug. Yeah.
So I'll just read some of my notes here and we can reflect on that. So stick insects reflect blending in, camouflage, observing your situation, playing dead maybe, keeping secrets, the power of stillness, building up your defenses, letting go of the past to move forward, utilizing the element of surprise to drive away predators. That's interesting because some of the stick insects flash their wings and they're brightly colored. So imagine you've got this little stick and you're a predator and you're walking along and then you're just like some stick comes alive, like scares the shit out of you.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm out of here. This bird would fly away or whatever. So, maybe doing the unexpected may be something that will help keep us safe as well. The other thing that really resonated with me was they talk about stick insects lay their eggs in multiple areas. So not putting all your eggs in one basket, diversifying your investments so that you aren't like just beholden to the forces of nature that could, wreck something if you just put it all in one place, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So stick insect.
Stick bug.
Stick
I
bug.
feel like maybe he needs to like join my crew.
Yeah, right.
Add some more of these like mystical creatures. Yeah, I like the piece about keeping hidden too. I feel like Taurus and Scorpio energy is very, very private,
Yeah.
very respectful of like, I need my boundaries. I need my internal place to kind of process stuff. And so as we are experiencing these shifts and changes in our life, maybe it's going to be helpful for now. And I feel like this also aligns beautifully with the Mercury retrograde that we're about to head into, to keep some things to yourself, let things simmer. Again, coming back to timing, don't rush to share. Maybe this is something that just needs to percolate and really take root, in the ground, so to speak, of your life before, you're ready to share that with other people. Yeah. And didn't you also mention, maybe I'm making this up, but I felt like you mentioned about they can regenerate like their limbs.
Yeah. They have this thing called parthenogenesis where I feel like they can reproduce a limb, but they also can reproduce asexually, like without another. I wonder if here I'll find it. And just for clarification on how I get my animal spirit, I love this book right here called Animal Frequency, which is sort of an expansion on this other book that I used for many years called Animal Speak by Ted Andrews. And what I'll do is I'll just go, oh, stick bug, like for the. So yeah, it says stick insect reproduces by parthenogenesis, which means the female doesn't need a male to reproduce. So they can just like, reproduce themselves, right?
Yeah.
So yes, and it says they are also tactically creative in that if a predator grabs its leg, the stick insect will use a muscle to detach the leg and will regenerate it the next time it molts. So yes, if you lose something important to you, it'll grow back in some form or another, right?
Right. It may have a different form, whatever is being let go of, or whatever you are choosing to let go of. I think about like relationships right now, friendships that may have changed. Maybe it's like a job that's just not vibing for you anymore and not serving you. Letting go of something is creating a space for something to grow in a new form in its place.
Totally.
So I think that seems significant.
I feel that. And I've been somebody who hangs on to certain things way too long. And then when I am forced to make the change, it's like, wow, I didn't know that was taking so much energy to continue to prop up,
Yeah.
So this is bringing us to our I-Ching reading, which is number 2, which is all yin lines, which is called the receptivity, docility, acceptance, acquiescence, adjustment, nurturing. And it's moving to hexagram number 59, which is called dispersion, dissolution, getting rid of egotism, bringing people together, finding a common purpose, clearing up blockages, melting the ice, eliminating the obstacles within the self. So through our receptivity, we're able to release the resentments, the blockages, the old narratives that are keeping us from this feeling of unity, of togetherness, right? Three changing lines. Line number 2 says straight, square, and great. He does nothing, yet nothing fails to be beneficial. So we can talk about the intimate, I'll talk about my notes here. It says intimate qualities of the earth, tolerance and acceptance, avoid pretense, behave simply and naturally, do exactly what is necessary, which it feels like Taurus II, right?
Yeah, it does. Very much so.
Just water just enough for it to grow, and then come back the next day and water it again. Okay. Line number 5 touches on the moderation that we were talking about earlier. It says a yellow skirt brings supreme good fortune. So yellow was the color of moderation in this tradition, this I-Ching tradition, the middle path moderation, behaving with modesty and tact, taking a low key approach. Like a Taurus, sometimes Tauruses will surprise you because they're not like, banging the drum like maybe a Leo would if when they enter, like, but you eventually you're just like, that person, man, they're really reliable. They just keep showing up and they don't make a fuss and they're low maintenance, low drama, and that's, I think that's the way to be with this. Being sincere. I wrote avoid peacocking, like be humble, modest, and unassuming. And then the last line, number 6. Now this one was interesting. I want to hear your thoughts on this. It says, dragons fight in the meadow. Their blood is black and yellow. So they talk about this being heaven, the color black, and the earth, the color yellow. Mm-hmm. So this was speaking about some kind of battle where someone in the lower regions is trying to overthrow someone in a higher position. So like a battle of trying to overthrow someone in greater authority than you. But with but it might, if you fail in this, it causes considerable damage to both people. Mm-hmm. So I was writing, don't engage in power struggles. Like don't overreach, be accommodating, cooperative, flexible. Don't demand too much of others. I think that one of the dangers we saw in this eclipse is the Venus, Jupiter, Neptune pile up, Mars too. We may be really, having a fantasy of what we want to achieve. Mm-hmm. And if we get a reality check from that overcoming Saturn, we may get a little upset about it. And I think this is trying to, reel us in a little bit. What do you think about that? Those dragons fighting in the meadow.
Took an ominous turn.
Yeah, right.
Else I was like, yes, I'm vibing with that. That is energy. And then this one's like, oh,
right. It was surprising. It was the one kind of like divinatory thing that was like, okay, keep your eye on that, right?
Yeah, I think, choosing your battles is important because you don't want to get into unnecessary conflict. And, coming back to Taurus being the cow, being a cow, cows are very sentient and emotionally intelligent creatures. Yep. And they're quite social as well. And they find a way to get along and they create friendships. I don't know if you know about that, about cows, but they do. They have their friends, they have their people within their herd. And just like humans, there are people that you're probably not always going to get along with. But at the same time, like we don't see cows just out in the pasture, like, fighting, because essentially we're all in this together, right? We're all eating from the same pasture, so to speak. We're all, needing the same resources to survive and to live, which is sometimes, the reminder of like life on Earth, right? So choosing our battles where if we're engaging in something where everyone's going to lose, that's something to keep in mind. And I think that that's something that's also going to be coming back in through, that we're going to be experiencing with Mars and Uranus and the North Node later this year, of environmental shakeups and potential disasters, and how that could have a ripple effect also into the collective. And how are we working together to, to deal with survival themes. Yeah, it sounds like a movie and like futuristic, but truly, I mean, someone shared with me on social media the other day that they were at, I don't know, Target or Walmart, and there was a mother that was visibly upset and crying because she couldn't buy formula. Mm-hmm. There was a very specific formula that her baby needed, and there was none available, and she'd been to a couple of different stores. And so being confronted with like basic needs of feeding and nourishing, your family, again, really Taurus stuff here. How do we reconcile that? How do we deal with that? Meanwhile, like there are people that have extreme excess, right? They're just like out buying Twitter and oh my God, it's so scary.
Don't get me started on that.
Yeah. We'll save that for another time. So there's also this extreme as well. I don't know. It's
100%. And I think that one of the things that I'll bring one last thing in here, and in research for this, you and I were both looking at Deborah Holding's website, and how she was talking about eclipses.
Yes.
And I want to read this because this I don't want to end this on a bummer, but it's important to be realistic about what this could bring as well.
Mm-hmm.
Deborah Holding on her website, skyscript.co, I think is the website, says eclipses in Taurus affect business, trade, grand buildings, agriculture, and men such as solicitors and agents who negotiate in others' affairs. They threaten high mortality for oxen, cows, and horses. So, and they also represent Russia, Ireland, Switzerland, Cyprus, and Persia. Of course, Russia's been in the news. So it's interesting that we'll wonder what we'll see potentially with that. But maybe like disruptions in supply chains potentially, maybe disruptions in the beef industry or something of that nature could also be a possible manifestation. We are dealing with rising inflation in America, and we're dealing with rising interest rates and all those things. And it may be with that Saturn overcoming square, it may be a time actually to consolidate and not overshoot the mark, right? And save a little bit for a rainy day and anticipate these changes. Because I think we're coming to, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, whatever the perspective, but we're dealing with late stage capitalism. We're dealing with the Pluto return of America and some reckoning about how we deal with our resources. And there's some changes that may be coming for everyone, right?
Yeah. A lot of deregulation, especially with the financial markets. I think that's going to continue to be really shaky, not even just with inflation, but, the stock market, the housing market. I mean, hello, you and I are dealing with that.
Yeah. It's insane.
It is. It's crazy. Yeah. And it's not just the United States. I have a lot of clients in Australia, and their housing market is equally challenging. And I know there are people in this community too, from different parts of the world, that can also probably speak to supplies and resources. I mean, I just read in the news yesterday about Russia now cutting off oil to Poland, and I think there was in another country.
Bulgaria, was that?
Yeah. Well, no, it's
Belarus. I don't know.
I don't remember, but so there's continued restriction, and I think it then comes back to our own personal experience and responsibility of conservation, and what's our role to play here, and even in our general communities, again, picking our battles. Like at the end of the day, we all are trying to find a way to survive. And so how are we going to cooperate and make sure that we can all eat from the pasture, or, are we going to pick battles that are ultimately going to put everyone in a losing situation? Yeah,
well stated, Hannah. And I think that what we're really looking for is the balance between personal centeredness and being able to take care of ourselves, to feel calm and peaceful and practice self-care, versus the communal responsibility that we have for one another as well. I find on many metaphysical channels, there's this extreme focus on, self-care and getting what you want and manifestation, but the communal responsibility part is less talked about. And I think that we're coming to a period of time and in history where both of those things are important. Yes, the more that you're centered, the better decisions that you might make that will contribute to the whole. And also taking a wider viewpoint. This is why I love this community we have. It's international.
Yeah.
It's not just us Midwesterners, talking. We're talking with people
fighting over football teams.
Yeah. We're talking with people in Europe and Australia and like all sorts of different places of the world, and starting to build these relationships with people like that helps us to see that our choices affect not only our personal communities, but that there is people that are affected by our own choices 1,000, 3,000, 4,000 miles away. And how do we balance that out? How do we humanize that rather than having it be just this abstraction? And so again, I want to just say how grateful I am for all of you for bringing that perspective here to us as well. It is so valuable. And I hope that we're maybe just creating more peace and world peace with our tiny little actions, our peace treaties here. You're really, you're speaking to the heart of our Taurus and Libra placements that we have, and how much joy that brings us. I would assume, Hannah, for you as well, being able to have that worldly perspective. So
Yeah, I'm an 11th house moon. So,
Yeah.
I really feel what other people and other communities are going through. And I definitely want to help to try to be a voice or a support to those problems, but also to celebrate when we're, experiencing those joys too.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because it's easy to get overwhelmed by the negativity that we're seeing in the world and the challenges we're going through. It's
Yes.
important to acknowledge them and not ignore them, but also find time to have some joy too, so that your hope can inspire the masses as well. Because
Yeah.
there's nothing more powerful than enthusiasm and hope to me,
Yeah.
And if we can bring that spirit to these challenges and think about them as just challenges, right? That where we come together, that's when we're going to be so powerful as a community and as a global community.
Yeah.
So Hannah, this was wonderful. Thank you so
You.
much for
Pleasure.
being in the bullpen here and being able to be called on in the ninth inning to close it out. It's a
That is
wonderful trait
great.
that you have.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you everyone that participated in the chat today. Again, Hannah, you have some Akashic record readings or
Yep.
things that you're doing, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be opening those back up for June. So if you're interested in having one of those sessions with me, get on my email list. I'll probably post something on Instagram. I'm very active over there as well. And in the meantime, I do offer, astrology readings as well. So
And there's a link to Hannah's website in the description of this video, divineskymistic.com. Again, sign up for the Decans of Taurus on May the 14th. Please join me for that. As you are all were seeing, there is a book club that is percolating, gestating within me, that will be born soon. Keep your eyes peeled for that. In the meantime, go out and order Demetra George's Astrology and Ancient Astrology and Theory and Practice, Volume 2, and we will work on that together as a group. But go get the book first, and then we'll figure out how to meet up as a group to go through it guided and together. And again, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment if you're listening afterwards as well. Thank you so much for all the support that you've all been giving me throughout some of the challenges I've been going through with my recent loss. So I really want to say thank you to all of you who have been reaching out and giving me support and boosting my spirits. It means so much to me. So thanks again, everyone. That's what I've got for you today. Remember just to be kind to one another, please, and be kind to yourself, and we'll get through this time together and embrace that change, okay? All right, my friends. Take care. Thank you, Hannah.
you're welcome.